Paul has been laying down the theological basis of our life. And starting right here through the end of the chapter, Paul begins to take that theology and he begins to move it into a very practical plan that God has. What's God's plan? It is to bring the rebels home to him. And so the first thing that you and I have to understand about our life, and I have to understand this literally every morning when I get up, I am a rebel to the things of God. And it's not that I'm just a little rebel. Okay, I'm a big rebel. I have rebelled against the God who knit me together in my mother's womb. I have rebelled against the nature that God created me to walk in. I have rebelled against holy God. Several years ago, I had an opportunity to speak at FCA event in Boyd in Decatur, and we were talking, and I told the students, I don't know, a couple thousand students there that night, and I said, I want you to turn to your neighbor, and I want you to say, you've sinned. And so they enjoyed that. They looked at their neighbor and said, you've sinned. I said, now I want you to say this, I've sinned. And they said it, but it wasn't quite as exuberant as the you've sinned. And I said, now I want you to say this, I've sinned against holy God. There was almost a hush. That thought stilled us all. And that's literally what Paul is trying to get across to these people, is that he's moving from the theological to the practical. And I have to begin to see myself as one who has rebelled against the one who spoke me into being. And so what Paul says is, look, if you and I could begin to do this, if in the still, quiet moments of our life, before we ever engage in public, if we could begin to understand in that moment, if I stopped and I said, to God be the glory, how would it change how I act when nobody else is around? How would it change how I act when others who don't know who I am are around? How would it change? Because that's exactly what Paul is talking about. The goal of this life is to live a life of worship under the leadership of the Holy Spirit.